Hello, and welcome to the course. I'm your host, Stephen, and today I'm speaking with Professor Lewis Shi, an associate professor of orthopedic surgery and rehabilitation medicine at the UChicago School of Medicine. Professor Shi specializes in orthopedic surgery and sports medicine and is an active researcher who has published over 100 peer-reviewed articles. He's also the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Shoulder and Elbow Arthroplasty. He's here today to speak with us about how he arrived at this specialization, what it's like to balance surgery, teaching, and research, and how he became a University of Chicago professor. Dr. Shi, welcome to the course. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure. Just to get the basics out of the way, could you please tell us your title, your role at UChicago, and just, in broad strokes, what you do there and what your role there is?
Thank you. So I am a physician at the University of Chicago Medical Center. So my role, first and foremost, is patient care. So I work as a physician, and in my role, I also teach residents, fellows, and medical students. My academic appointment at the university is associate professor of orthopedic surgery.
We often ask people in advance, like what they imagine themselves doing as a kid. Astronaut is a common answer, that type of thing. But I believe in your pre-interview, you actually said physician. So did you actually always want to be a doctor?
My formative years was spent in Beijing, China. So I was born and raised in Beijing, and I lived there until I was 12. So everything about my life before then was very different. And my life in the United States since then, in terms of my career, has been since arriving in the United States. Because age 12, I guess, is a time when you have more sense of yourself, maybe more identity in terms of future life. Grew up in the 80s. I arrived in the US in the late 80s. While in China, I was in Beijing, starting in a large city, but, it certainly is not like the international environment it is now. I didn't really learn English, so that when I came to the United States, that's one of the first things is learn the culture of the US as well as the language itself. And I grew up in the US in a small town in the southern part of the US in Florida, Tallahassee, Florida. And it is during my middle school and high school years that I developed an interest in medicine, shadowing physicians, volunteering in the hospital, and went to a few health career camps, introducing me to a life of a health provider, not just a physician, but nursing, pharmacists, and other type of careers involved in healthcare. And it is at that time that I became interested, thinking that maybe medicine is something I want to pursue.
When you got to college, was that pretty much the track that you had decided to follow, like by the time you arrived on campus? Like you knew you wanted to study medicine?
I went to college, Harvard College in Cambridge, and it is certainly a liberal arts school. And I was taking courses in different areas. I did focus on biochemistry, which was my major, but certainly half the courses was in other things. I did a minor in applied math, which was my interest throughout high school, and certainly in college as well. But at that time, I certainly was interested in medicine, and it was on my mind to pursue medical school. I took the traditional pre-med courses such as organic chemistry and various levels of biology. And through that time, I explored further about what medicine was about. And then I realized that going to medical school was a natural next step. And even then, afterwards, I still have various career options open to me, whether a practicing clinician or a basic science researcher, or even joining industry or even consultant in healthcare. So I did decide to go to medical school after college.
I'm curious though, you mentioned applied math. Like, is that something that you feel you have used or that has like come up in your career at all? Or is that something that you kind of had to leave behind?
Applied mathematics in general was an interest of mine. My father studied mathematics in graduate school, and that was one thing that I always, competed in as a high school student. At the college level, I, was interested in that. I felt applied math could have a future impact in my career, but I don't do it at a highest level in terms of the knowledge that I learned in college in terms of my day to day. We certainly will get into some of my research. I do quite a bit of biostatistics, research, quantitative research. So I think some of that background does help me in terms of my day to day.
I'm looking at your education and training on the UChicago website now. It's Harvard, 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 Harvard from 2000 to 2012. Can you explain to me and to our listeners like what the different steps were?
So for those not, aware of the medical education system in the United States, we do 4 years of undergraduate college, and then medical school is 4 years. After that, if one chooses to become a clinician or researcher, most physicians end up going to residency. Depending on the specialty, it could be 3 to 7 or 8 years. And then after residency, one can further specialize in a fellowship. And I spent 4 years in college. And in medical school, I actually spent 6 years in medical school because I took 2 years off to do basic science research. And then I did 5 years of orthopedic surgery residency. And then I did another year of fellowship specialized in shoulder surgery. So I am a shoulder surgeon. Yes, I was at Harvard for a long time. They call folks like me Preparation H. So the it was
I'm sure you
naturally
appreciate that nickname a lot.
um, so in college, I was applying to medical school, and Harvard was certainly one of the top college medical schools I was accepted in. And being familiar with that environment, I opted to stay at Harvard. And then during Harvard medical school, I was exposed to different specialties. I was contemplating other things, internal medicine, eventually possibly do GI or cardiology. Some of the other surgical fields, including urology and plastic surgery. And then I fell in love with orthopedics because of the type of surgery and the type of people and the type of patients. People as in the surgeons, that my future colleagues. So I elected to apply in orthopedic surgery, which is one of the more competitive specialties in residency to apply in. And I was fortunately able to match into the Harvard teaching hospital system. Part of the reason I think I matched there is because I've been working with the professors and the surgeons there, so they knew me. They knew what kind of person I was. Therefore, I probably had a leg up. In fact, if I didn't have that option, I, do not know where I would have matched. So I was lucky to have gotten into Harvard. And then next level, I apply in the fellowship, and I certainly had different options. And then because different life decisions happened I was in Boston and it's hard to move another year, so I decided to stay there for another year
Sure.
and train with a well-known shoulder surgeon at Massachusetts General Hospital. So that was my training career. I was in Boston for 17 or so years.
You said you fell in love with orthopedics. I'm curious how that happens. I've talked to plenty of people in other fields about how they took one class and got hooked, or they read one book and got hooked. And I don't really know how that works for a surgeon, but what drew you, I guess, to surgery, and then what drew you to orthopedics?
I was interested in a hands-on specialty, meaning I was interested in being a proceduralist. What it means is surgeons or medical specialties that involve using hands, such as GI procedure, doing endoscopies, or cardiologist, interventional, putting in pacemakers, other things. So I was exploring these options, and I knew that I want my future career to be a combination of using my brain, thinking through problems, as well as using my hand to help patients. And then as a third year medical student, we rotate through different specialties, and orthopedics is the specialty that clicked. I mentioned I like the people, meaning the surgeons and the residents I was working with. In general, they seem to be a happy group in terms of their outlook on life, their quality of life. And then the patient I was taking care of, in general, most patients that we interact with, particularly now, they get better,
Hmm.
right? Orthopedics is one of those things. It may be episodic care. I do not take care of patients for their life. I'm not a primary care or family physician. I may get referred their kids, but I'm not a family doctor that take care of generations of family year in, year out. I'm someone, people come to me with a problem, an injury. I solve that problem. Hopefully they're happy with my care. Hopefully they're happy with the outcome of their process healing process, whether that's surgery or non-operative treatment, and they get better. And people leave my clinic, they're happy to say, hopefully I never see you again. And I'm happy with that. Right. Um, and and that's, among the reasons why. Other things include the patient population I work with. I work with patients that are very young, teenagers, athletes in high school who injure their shoulder, their elbow. I take care of patients in their 80s and 90s. I just operated on a 95-year-old doing a shoulder replacement. He's very healthy. He's got years to go. I improved his quality of life. So there's a breadth of pathology I take care of. There's breadth of patient age and background. So these are all the reasons why orthopedics is what I chose, as well as shoulder surgery. There's some specialties in orthopedics that some of those things I talked about may not exactly apply, such as orthopedic oncology, for
Right.
example. Those patients with, cancer of the bone, those patients you do have a obviously long-term relationship with them, and unfortunately, some of those patients do not do as well.
Mhm.
But in what I chose, sports medicine slash shoulder surgery, I enjoy my patient relationship, even though they may be episodic.
I have to say, though, I mean, we talk to people in all sorts of different specialties on this show, and it takes a certain type of person to be a music professor. It takes a certain type of person to study history. But when it comes to actually operating on people, I mean, I feel like that is something that's sort of either you are or you aren't. And I'm curious, like, was there a moment for you where you decided, yep, I can do surgery, like this is where I'm meant to be, or is that just kind of something that you felt like you knew going in?
I will give you my perspective because I do a lot of teaching and
Mm-hmm.
work with residents and trainees and medical students and even college students that come across my research lab. And we teach students and residents and fellows in the operating room. There are many surgeons or budding surgeons who are super talented. And they're in the OR, they just have a commanding presence, their hand and whatnot. You can tell they're a born surgeon. I'm not one of those people. Um, Fortunately for me and most trainees and who is going to surgery, most of us can learn, and this is a teachable thing, and we can improve. Number of hours during a surgery. Some patients come see me, they look at me, they think I'm young. They said, "How many of these have you done?" I do a lot of shoulder replacements, which is one of the bigger surgeries. I tell them I've done probably 1,500 or 2,000, and they look at me like, "Are you sure you look so young?" But it's experience, right? I can't tell you whether it was the 200th or 500th or thousands where I was more comfortable. It's a gradual process. One in the first few years of my career, I had a senior mentor who said, Lewis, you learn to operate in the first 5 years of practice. And this is again after 4 years of college, 4 years of medical school, 5 years residency, 1 year fellowship. You're in your late 30s or mid 30s, you're starting your career. And I thought to myself, I was pretty good already, right? I knew what
Yeah.
I was doing. But then, as I went on the 5 years and the second 5 years into 10 years, and now I'm in my 13th years of practice, I'm realizing that's certainly the case. That's why they call it a practice, right? It's a medical practice. You are learning about how to take care of patients, how to talk to them, how to make them feel comfortable, how to behave in the operating room, how to treat other team members so that everyone's on the same page, what to do with complications, etc. And learn to want to operate, learn when to not operate. And this is it's a gradual process.
You mentioned students, you mentioned research, and could you just quickly draw out for us what your role entails? Like, kind of what percentage of your time, how many days of the week, like are you in surgery? How much time do you spend teaching and doing research? How does that look?
So my week looked like about 2 days in the operating room, I'm doing surgery for those 2 days, which means I'm not doing anything else. I'm doing one surgery after the other. And then 2 days, I'm in clinic seeing patients, seeing new patients, evaluating them. Some of them are getting ready for surgery. Others are post-op patients. So I have 2 whole days, I'm just seeing patients. And then one day I'm a quote unquote academic day where I'm doing research, I'm writing manuscripts, I'm preparing PowerPoints and that adds up to, also traveling, etc. Now when I'm teaching, what I mean, most of my teaching as a surgeon is while I am doing my clinical duty. For example, in clinic, I'll have a resident or student with me and they're working together. They may be seeing a patient first, evaluating that patient, and then formulating a plan. I go back with them to see the same patient. I'll examine the patient with them, and then we'll come up with a diagnosis together. The things they're picking up, they see how I am taking care of the patient. And then in surgery, there will be my assistants, residents or students who are scrubbed in as part of the same surgery. I'm the surgeon, I'm doing the surgery, but there will be parts of it where they get involved, some of it where I'm doing everything, they're holding retractors, others, they're a little bit more involved. So that's the teaching I have. Now, research, as I like to say, mostly happens on nights and weekends, right?
Mm.
So yes, I have the 1 day research. I speak to students in the late evenings over Zooms, go over data. So that happens kind of off hours, even though technically I have 20% dedicated research. But you could joke about I am 90% clinical, 90% research. That's because everything happens on different hours of the day.
And teaching throughout both, it sounds like.
Yes. Yes, in terms of research, a big part of the research obviously is to have producing impactful outcome. But a lot of it is actually, particularly for me, is to mentor students.
Mhm.
And then all the way, I have a high school student in my lab, many college students, and some medical students, probably is the majority of the people that's working together with me, and then some residents, even though their chief job as doing residency is learn to be an orthopedic surgeon. That entails surgery and seeing patients in clinic. Many of them are interested in academia or interested in research, and then they will get involved in the research as well, despite their busy lives, because they work very longer hours than I as an attending surgeon.
Wow. Well, can you explain a little bit more about what your research sort of entails and what you and the people around you are interested in and researching right now?
My research divided into two different types. One, I will call it clinical research. The other will be translational research. So clinical research will be very much tied into how we do surgery, how can we improve the surgeries done, how we take care of patients at the nitty-gritty detail. That will entail, for example, I am inventing or I'm designing a different way of doing the surgery. Uh, and can I look at my outcome for the last 2 years of these type of surgery for the patients that did this, and then compare to the standard of care, and then comparing that cohort and writing up the results and then publishing it, and then presenting at the national meetings and trying to write it up so that other patient knows my experience. Or looking at prospective study, thinking does bone marrow aspirate, which is source of stem cell, does that enhance healing of the rotator cuff? And that's the study I'm starting, and that's a prospective study that it involves funding, getting grants from different agencies, and then perhaps randomizing patients into one group versus the other, and then seeing their outcome. These are examples of clinical research. Obviously, we would need to get consents of patients, and that involves a team of students and nurses and researchers to work together. That will be clinical research. The translational research, I am very lucky to be at a place like University of Chicago, which has world caliber scientists, where we're doing basic science research, but having a clinical application to it. Dr. T.C. He is a basic scientist I work with at U of C, and we're looking at different ways to enhance tendon and cartilage healing. So that, they give you an example of the logistics of a small study. Let's say there's some tissue sample from surgery that may ordinarily be discarded, but with patient's permission, we may harvest some of that and then bring them to lab, look at the DNA, genetic expression, protein profiles, and see how can we optimize the healing of patients after surgery. There are other scientists across university that work with, including professor of chemistry as well as molecular engineering. We have multiple collaborative projects with different things, different people across university. I think that's the beauty of this place where I am looking for techniques and different ways where surgery can be improved through the brightest minds the university can attract. And then these, world famous professors are looking for clinical, real world applications to the technology, to the science that they have. And that's why we work together in trying to improve patient care.
That's really interesting. I mean, how does that type of collaboration come about when you're not even like in the same, department or school?
Yes, that's a very good question. There are mechanisms within the university that encourages such collaboration across disciplines, across departments. So there, different funding mechanism to induce several seemingly unrelated people, departments to work together. Um, in the examples I used, Dr. He is my long-term collaborator. He happened to be a basic scientist in the orthopedic department, so we know each other that way. But the molecular engineer, Dr. Chen, and then the chemistry professor, Dr. Tian, they are colleagues I met because our kids go to the same school. So through various dinner parties, and there's a university has a laboratory school, which is where the children of the faculty often go to those schools, and for these exact same reasons, so that there are additional opportunities for the parents, i.e., the professors, to bond through various other venues. So they're just different gatherings. We start talking about the things we're interested in, and we're like, well, yeah, we can collaborate on this, and then bore out these. Now we end up meeting once a month and go over our results together. So I don't know if this applies to other people, but it seems to be very common that some of these meetings are random, but maybe not so random. Maybe it's by design.
Yeah, there are formal and informal structures there to bring people together. That's funny. One thing I did want to ask is just what advice would you have for someone who is looking to follow in your footsteps?
I would hope everyone can follow their own passion. But if they're interested in what I've done and the pathway I've led, I am always available to talk to people. And what I mean is find your mentor. Mentors are important. I've been very fortunate to have good mentors in my career who've at every stage looked up to and who's guided me through this process. And even though I'm, more senior now, I still have mentors who are, guiding me to the next steps. In my life, I felt like when I look back at the decision I make, some people ask me whether I could have chosen a different way. I always feel like once I have a fork in the road, once I take the fork, I don't tend to look back on it, right? I'm so committed to what I'm doing. Do I doubt my decision 3 years ago, 10 years ago? I never do that because it seems like I'm so committed down this path. And if I'm making sense, is my recommendation to younger folks is to be committed. And once you go down a path, there will still be many different options for you to choose from. And then once you choose that, there will still be more options. Uh, so be committed and find the mentors, I think, and then, follow your passion.
Yeah, that is great and yeah, applicable across the board, not just if looking to become a surgeon. I might be able to guess based on some things that you've said already, but just to close us out here, could you please tell us what you find most fulfilling about what you do?
So I certainly love taking care of patients when they come back with great results and they're very thankful. That's certainly something that, even I may just need one patient like that a day that makes my day. And then there are patients that I know that I've helped over the years that do great, and they don't come see me to tell me they're thankful, but I know they're out there. So that's my life, helping patients. I've talked about teaching and mentoring is a big part of my life, and the students that find their niche in life, whether they end up choosing orthopedics and or research or do something else, for the moments, the length of time that we're working together, I'm thankful for the opportunity to have guided them in a certain way. And last thing I certainly want to talk about, which I haven't really talked about much about, is certainly my family. I enjoy the ability to spend time with my wife and my kids. That's certainly what sustains me and drives me in my work and teaching and patient care.
Thank you, Professor Shi, for your time today. And course takers, if you enjoyed today's interview, please check out the others. Leave us a comment, subscribe, follow, and share this episode with your friends and family. You can find out more about the University of Chicago through uchicago.edu or the university's campus in Hong Kong through uchicago.hk. Stay tuned for more, and thanks for listening.